He nui te oranga o te wā. Ko te tūwā papa o te ngahere. Kei ngā mana, kei ngā rea a tāne. E tū hono hono ai ngā papa.
Kia ora. Introducing Dr. Andrew Cridge, our scientist today. His research focuses on understanding and responding to native and exotic insects in forest ecosystems. Could you please share and explain forest biodiversity?
Yes, simply put, forest biodiversity is the mix of species in a forest. So if you think about a forest, it'll have animals, it'll have birds, it'll have insects. And when you're talking about biodiversity, you're talking about all the different insects and animals in that area. And the variation in biodiversity is related to the ecosystem health. So if you have a healthy river or a healthy forest, you'll find more species in an area and you'll find there'll be more abundance, so there'll be more of them. We study insects specifically for biodiversity because they're a good measure of how healthy an ecosystem is. And you can trap the insects, count them, look how many you have, look at the numbers of each species you have, and then you can release them back into the ecosystem. And by monitoring biodiversity in this way, we can monitor how well a forest is recovering after a storm or a fire, and we can make some predictions about whether an ecosystem is improving or it's declining.
What is an ecosystem, and are they changing in Aotearoa?
If you think of Rotorua, we have some unique ecosystems. So we're talking about the lakes, the rivers, the forests, so different parts of the landscape. And yes, our ecosystems are changing. And one of the big drivers for change in our ecosystem is climate change. As it becomes hotter and drier, it becomes harder for some insects and animals to survive in their natural ecosystems. And the other big driver for change is invasive species, so invasive plant species and invasive insects as well. So they change the dynamic inside an ecosystem because they move the resources around, and the habitats that certain insects or animals need disappear, and you see a decline in those insects. Insects need a range of habitats for their survival and their life cycles. They particularly like needing rotting logs to live in, they need flowers to pollinate, and they also like living in leaf litter and on the forest floor. So if you have a diversity in habitats which include all those, then you have a healthy ecosystem and you'll have a lot of really interesting insects occupying those particular niches.
Are insects good or bad?
In the forest, insects are important for the forest ecosystem. They're important for pollination and helping produce the next generation of seed for the forest. They're an important food source for birds and a lot of the aquatic insects such as fish. And they're also very important in helping turn over the old logs and trees and branches that fall to the forest floor. And they help break those down to release the nutrients for the next generation of plants. Where insects become a pest is when their numbers get out of control. And you see that a lot with exotic introduced insects because normally they don't have their natural predators with them when they come to the country. So their numbers tend to build up, and that's when they become a problem.
So, what exactly do insects do?
In the forest, insects have a number of roles, and the one important ones are pollinating of flowers. They're also herbivores, so they eat plants and keep plant numbers in check. They're also predators of other insects to help balance that ecosystem that we talked about previously. And we also dendritivores, which means that they break down dead material and turn that material over so that the nutrients flow into the next generation of plants. They also have a very big role in aerating soil and turning soil over, so think of earthworms, and moving that soil around in the forest to help aerate soil and make that a healthy soil for trees to grow in. It's often said that if you removed all the birds and frogs from a forest, it would take 1,000 years before the forest started to degrade. If you removed all the insects, it would happen very, very quickly in only a matter of months.
What can we learn from insects?
At Scion, we study insects for two main reasons. One is biosecurity and the other is biodiversity. We have a collection at Scion that contains about 150,000 insect species, which have been collected over the last 80 years. And that's a really valuable resource when we're looking at biosecurity. So if an insect's intercepted at the border by an MPI official, they can send that insect to us and we can identify it and compare it to our collection. And we can tell them whether the insect is being found in New Zealand before or if it's new to New Zealand. And the other great thing about the insect collection is when we study biodiversity, we can basically time travel back and look back to 1950 and say, in this area we found these insect species. If we look in that area today, do we find the same species or do we find different species? Has land use change impacted upon the biodiversity that we see? And remember, of course, that biodiversity is very good for the planet. The more biodiversity we have, the more healthier ecosystems we have, the more healthier planet we have. So we're striving all the time to improving biodiversity in our forests.
Kia uru kahikatea te tū. Tihei, Mōri ora.